Imagine standing on the bridge of a British corvette in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean at 3 in the morning. It's May 1943, and you can't see your hand in front of your face. The darkness is absolute, the kind of pitch black that makes experienced sailors feel blind and helpless. 20 miles away, a German U-boat commander is on his conning tower, breathing in the salt air, confident that his submarine is invisible in this darkness. His crew is relaxed, smoking cigarettes, joking with each other while their diesel engines charge the massive batteries below. Their radar detector is completely silent. They have no idea, not even the slightest hint, that they're being watched. Inside your corvette, a young radar operator is staring at a glowing green screen, watching a bright that represents that U-boat. He can see the submarine's exact position, its speed, even which direction it's heading. The U-boat crew thinks they're invisible, but to you, they might as well be lit up with searchlights. In exactly 7 minutes, your ship will be in attack position. In 8 minutes, your depth charges will be falling. In 9 minutes, that U-boat and every man aboard will be at the bottom of the Atlantic, and they'll die never understanding what detected them, never knowing that an invisible technology had been hunting them all along. This isn't science fiction. This is a true story of May 1943, when 42 German U-boats were destroyed in a single month by a technology so secret, so revolutionary, that even today most people don't know the full story. This is about the moment when a device no bigger than your fist changed the entire course of World War II, killed 30,000 men, and transformed naval warfare forever. What you're about to hear will change everything you thought you knew about the Battle of the Atlantic, because this isn't a story about brave sailors or bigger guns or better tactics. This is about how British scientists created an invisible weapon that the Germans never saw coming, and by the time they figured out, it was far too late. Stay with me, because you're about to discover the secret technology that won the war. North Atlantic, May 24th, 1943, exactly 0600 hours. Grand Admiral Doenitz sat completely alone in his headquarters office at the Hotel AM Steinplatz in Berlin, staring down at the message sheet on his desk with hands that trembled slightly despite decades of iron military discipline and self-control. The order he was about to transmit to every U-boat commander still alive and operating in the Atlantic Ocean would mark the definitive end of everything they had fought for, sacrificed for, died for since September 1939, when the war began. This was the admission, painful and humiliating, that his legendary wolf packs had been utterly defeated not by superior Allied seamanship, not by brilliant tactical innovations, not by overwhelming numbers of escort vessels, but by a technology his own technical experts and scientists had repeatedly and categorically assured him was physically impossible to build, that violated the known laws of physics as they understood them. A radar system operating at wavelengths the scientists swore couldn't work, that could detect submarines in absolute darkness, through fog and rain and storm, could see what human eyes could never hope to detect even in perfect visibility in broad daylight. The casualty number spread across his desk told a story written in the blood of young German submariners and the cold seawater of the Atlantic. 42 U-boats destroyed in a single month, more losses than any previous month in the entire war. 1,832 of his best trained, most experienced submariners dead. Gone forever to the bottom of the Atlantic in steel coffins they believed were invincible weapons. 25% of his entire operational submarine strength completely annihilated in just 30 days of operations. All because British escort corvettes and RAF Coastal Command patrol aircraft carried mysterious devices mounted in odd-looking housings that could detect a submarine periscope at 900 yards distance in pitch darkness, could track a surface U-boat charging its batteries from 3 miles away while remaining completely invisible to German detection equipment, could guide depth charges and Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars onto targets with devastating accuracy while the attacking crews never even saw their victims with their own eyes. His boats had been sitting on the surface at night, completely confident in their invisibility, totally unaware they were being continuously watched, precisely tracked, and systematically hunted by an electromagnetic detection, and yet they couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't detect with any equipment they possessed, and couldn't possibly escape. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the hidden story of how technology changed World War II, hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from today. The withdrawal message went out at precisely 0615 hours, transmitted by radio to every U-boat command station and base from Norway down through France to the Bay of Biscay. All boats withdraw immediately from North Atlantic convoy routes. Cease all offensive operations against Allied convoys. Return to base for reassignment. And in that exact moment, as Donitz would later write with painful honesty in his post-war memoirs, we had definitively lost the Battle of the Atlantic. The submarine campaign that had brought Great Britain to the very edge of starvation and defeat in 1940 and 1941, that had sunk millions upon millions of tons of irreplaceable Allied merchant shipping, that had been Nazi Germany's only remaining strategic weapon genuinely capable of winning the war through economic strangulation, was completely finished. Ended not by greater numbers of Allied ships, not by braver sailors, not by superior tactics or training, but by pure physics and electromagnetic engineering that his naval intelligence services and scientific advisors had never anticipated, never imagined possible, never prepared any defense against. But what Donitz didn't know that morning, what he couldn't possibly know sitting in his headquarters office in Berlin, was that the revolutionary technology systematically destroying his submarine force had first been successfully tested on a small flower-class corvette designated HMS Orcis in the Firth of Clyde in Scotland on March 25, 1941, more than 2 full years before this moment of surrender and withdrawal. A prototype radar device officially designated Type 271 had successfully tracked a submerged submarine at 4,000 yards distance and detected its periscope at 900 yards. Detection ranges that seem like pure science fiction to experienced naval officers who have spent their entire careers relying exclusively on human eyesight, binoculars, and optical rangefinders. British radar engineers working at the secret telecommunications research establishment had achieved these seemingly impossible detection ranges by using a revolutionary cavity magnetron device operating at 10-centimeter wavelength, a frequency band that German radar warning receivers simply couldn't detect because German scientists and engineers had thoroughly convinced themselves through theoretical calculations that such high-frequency radars couldn't possibly exist or function effectively, thereby creating a catastrophic blind spot in Nazi Germany's defensive sensor systems that would prove absolutely fatal to the entire U-boat arm. The British radar operator sitting at his Type 271 console aboard HMS Orcis that cold March morning in 1941 had watched the glowing green trace on a circular oscilloscope display, carefully and methodically adjusting the sensitive gain control as the target submarine deliberately raised its attack periscope for a practice attack run during routine training exercises in the Firth of Clyde. And suddenly there was, appearing on his radar screen almost like magic, like something from a science fiction novel, a sharp, distinctive spike at exactly 900 yards range, clear as daylight on his screen, perfectly visible and trackable, though the Scottish morning outside the ship was extremely thick with heavy mist and fog that reduced actual visual visibility to less than 50 yards for the lookouts on deck. The 10-centimeter wavelength radar waves were successfully penetrating through the sea clutter and confusing wave returns that would have completely swallowed and hidden the tiny periscope echo on older metric wavelength radars operating at much longer wavelengths, successfully pulling out and displaying the incredibly tiny radar signature of a thin periscope tube cutting through the ocean waves. And he had immediately called out the bearing information to the bridge officers, his voice remaining steady and professional despite the genuine excitement of watching genuine history being made before his eyes. Radar contact bearing 045 degrees, range 900 yards, target identified as probable submarine periscope. Not knowing, not possibly to fully comprehend, that he was personally witnessing the very first successful operational demonstration of a technology that would directly sink 42 German U-boats in a single month just 2 years later, that would ultimately kill 30,000 German submariners over the course of the war, that would change and revolutionize naval warfare more completely and more rapidly than even the introduction of steam power or the revolutionary dreadnought battleship design had done. What made this particular moment in March 1941 truly revolutionary in the history of naval warfare? What absolutely separated it from every single previous radar development and advancement wasn't simply the successful detection itself of a submarine. Naval radar systems have been successfully tracking surface vessels since the late 1930s. British, German, American, and even Japanese ships all carried various types of radar systems by 1940. But the genuine breakthrough was the ability to successfully detect and track something as incredibly small as a submarine periscope cutting through ocean waves, a target less than 18 inches wide at its thickest point that earlier British radar systems operating at 1.5-meter wavelength simply couldn't distinguish at all from the sea surface itself, from wave tops and whitecaps and floating debris and seabirds. Yet this revolutionary new S-band radar system operating at exactly 2,950 megahertz frequency could resolve it clearly and distinctly, could successfully pick out that tiny metal periscope tube from all the confusing radar clutter of an angry, wave-tossed ocean. The remarkably narrow beam width of the distinctive cheese antenna, nicknamed for its characteristic truncated parabolic shape that genuinely looked like a wheel of cheese cut precisely in half, provided exceptional angular accuracy of just 2 degrees, precise enough to guide a corvette directly and accurately onto a submerged U-boat's exact position for a devastating depth charge attack with unprecedented accuracy. No more blind searching over wide ocean areas, no more educated guessing about submarine positions, no more relying entirely on the sonar operator's individual skill and pure luck. Just pure, reliable electronic precision pointing like an invisible finger directly at the enemy's submarine hiding beneath the protective waves. The revolutionary cavity magnetron device that made this seemingly impossible technological miracle actually possible had been invented by 2 brilliant British physicists named John Randall and Harry Boot, working at the University of Birmingham in February 1940. 2 dedicated scientists working in a laboratory that would have seemed remarkably primitive and underfunded by modern research standards. They created a device physically no bigger than a small electric motor, easily fitting in the palm of a grown man's hand, that could generate microwave radio frequency power levels that literally every previous physicist and electrical engineer had thought fundamentally impossible to achieve with existing vacuum tube technology and theoretical understanding. And within just weeks of its first successful laboratory demonstration, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, immediately recognizing genuine revolutionary genius when he personally saw it and instantly understanding exactly what this particular invention meant for Britain's survival in the war, had personally ordered it shared completely with the Americans in what would historically become known as the Tizard Mission, named after Sir Henry Tizard, who led the secret scientific delegation that carried the cavity magnetron to America. Churchill recognized with characteristic strategic insight that this single invention might very well determine the final outcome of the desperate battle of the Atlantic, might literally be the difference between British national survival and complete starvation and defeat, between ultimate Allied victory and total Nazi conquest of Europe. Though neither Churchill nor any of the brilliant scientists working on the radar development project could have possibly predicted exactly how completely and how rapidly it would revolutionize anti-submarine warfare operations, turning the U-boat hunters into the hunted almost overnight. By September 1941, barely 6 months after that first successful test aboard HMS Orcis, 32 Royal Navy corvettes were equipped with operational Type 271 radar sets, each one featuring the distinctive lantern-shaped radome mounted prominently on their bridge structures, looking to German U-boat commanders who observed them through periscopes like nothing more threatening than an odd navigation light housing, or perhaps some new communication equipment. Production orders from the Admiralty were climbing rapidly toward 350 complete radar units as British industry fully mobilized to manufacture these potentially war-winning devices as quickly as possible. Each individual radar set was being carefully assembled at the Allen West factory in London with the desperate wartime urgency of manufacturing a weapon that could literally and directly turn the entire tide of war, with factory workers voluntarily putting in exhausting 16-hour shifts with absolute priority allocation of scarce electronic components and critical raw materials. Though the Germans remained completely and tragically unaware of this massive radar development and deployment program, their intelligence services remained obsessively focused on breaking Allied convoy routing codes through cryptanalysis rather than investigating, and analyzing the strange perspex dome structures that were increasingly appearing on British escort vessels, fundamentally missing the forest of the trees, desperately seeking intelligence coups when they should have been carefully analyzing new Allied technology. The German U-boat commanders actively operating in the North Atlantic during this critical period, from late 1941 through early 1943, still believed absolutely and without question that nighttime surface operations gave them complete invisibility from any form of detection, made them the undisputed masters of the ocean. And why shouldn't they believe this with total confidence? Their tactical operational doctrine, carefully refined by Donitz himself during his extensive time commanding U-boats in the First World War, stated categorically and without qualification that a surface submarine operating at night was virtually undetectable beyond 500 yards distance, even in the very best visibility conditions. This wasn't just abstract theory or hopeful thinking. It was solidly based on decades of practical submarine operational experience, on thousands upon thousands of hours of actual night operations, on the fundamental physical limitations of human eyesight operating in darkness. And their standard operational patterns clearly reflected this absolute confidence in their nighttime invisibility. Surface at dusk as natural light faded completely. Run continuously on powerful diesel engines throughout the entire night, while simultaneously charging the massive battery banks that powered all underwater operations. Attack Allied convoys aggressively on the surface, where their 17-knot maximum speed gave them decisive mobility advantage over 10-knot merchant ships. Then dive well before dawn before Allied patrol aircraft could possibly spot them from above. This tactical pattern had worked brilliantly and devastatingly in 1940 and 1941, during what U-boat crews nostalgically called a happy time, when they were sinking Allied merchant ships significantly faster than the Allies could possibly build replacements. Captain Lieutenant Werner Heinke, commanding U-515 and keeping meticulous records, would later describe in his carefully maintained war diary the typical night surface routine that literally every U-boat commander followed like an inflexible religious ritual. Surface at exactly 2,100 hours. Sea State 3 with moderate waves running. Visibility approximately 2,000 meters in the complete darkness. Began standard battery charge cycle while proceeding on course 320 degrees at 12 knots, making excellent time toward the known convoy routes. Both diesel engines running smooth and reliable, producing familiar deep rumble that every experienced submariner found oddly comforting after many hours of near-silent electric motor operation underwater. The crew thoroughly enjoyed breathing fresh air after 14 consecutive hours submerged in the boat, with men smoking cigarettes on the conning tower, the acrid smell of diesel exhaust mixing pleasantly with clean salt spray. Absolutely no sign whatsoever of any enemy forces anywhere visible on the entire horizon. The ocean belonged completely to us in the protective darkness. Completely unaware, tragically and fatally unaware, that British escort vessels equipped with Type 271 radar could easily track his boat at 3 times his maximum visual range, continuously watching his every single move on their green glowing radar displays, while his alert lookouts strained their eyes desperately and saw absolutely nothing except empty ocean stretching endlessly to the dark horizon. He was perfectly visible to British radar operators, as clearly as if powerful searchlights were directly illuminating his entire boat, but he had absolutely no idea, no clue whatsoever, no warning at all. The battery charging process itself created a severe tactical vulnerability that U-boat designers had never adequately addressed because they simply never imagined that technology would eventually make night surface operations genuinely dangerous. The massive lead-acid electrical storage systems required 6 to 8 full hours of continuous surface running to completely replenish the battery cells that powered absolutely all underwater operations, including propulsion, lighting, and life support. Each standard type WWII U-boat, the reliable workhorse of the entire German submarine fleet comprising 70% of all boats, carried 2 complete independent sets of 62 individual cells each, weighing over 200 tons total when fully charged, representing a staggering amount of weight devoted exclusively to electrical energy storage. These massive battery banks demanded constant careful maintenance, needed regular topping up with distilled water, generated dangerously explosive hydrogen gas during the charging process that had to be continuously vented to prevent the boat from literally becoming a floating bomb. And most critically from a tactical operational perspective, the charging process absolutely forced the submarine to remain on the surface for extended periods whether tactical conditions were favorable or not, whether enemy forces were nearby or not. A severe weakness that radar technology would exploit with absolutely merciless efficiency, turning every single charging period into a potential death trap. During these tactically vulnerable charging periods, U-boats necessarily followed absolutely predictable patterns born entirely of engineering necessity rather than any tactical choice or preference. Running at 8 to 12 knots to maximize diesel fuel efficiency and minimize precious fuel consumption during long, extended patrols lasting weeks. Maintaining steady courses to avoid excessive battery power drain from constant maneuvering and frequent course changes. Posting extra lookouts continuously scanning both sky and horizon, but relying primarily and almost completely on their Metox radar warning detectors to warn them of approaching enemy aircraft long before human eyes or ears could possibly detect a threat. The French-built Metox warning device swept radio frequencies from 79 to 300 megahertz, effectively covering the 1.5-meter wavelength ASV Mark II radars that RAF Coastal Command aircraft had carried operationally since 1940. This reliable system gave U-boats typically 5 to 10 minutes advance warning before an aircraft could reach attack position, absolutely precious time to execute a crash dive and escape to the relative safety of protected depths. More than enough time in almost every case to get safely below periscope depth before the aircraft arrived directly overhead. The Metox receiver, manufactured by a small electronics company operating in occupied Paris using readily available French components, had absolutely transformed U-boat survivability when it was first introduced operationally in August 1942. Its distinctive Biscay cross antenna, looking remarkably like a large wooden crucifix, was erected prominently on the conning tower whenever the boat surfaced. The characteristic crackling and buzzing sounds in the operator's headphones whenever enemy radar pulses struck the receiving antenna, with the pitch and frequency increasing noticeably as the threatening aircraft drew closer, gave the commander precise advance warning of danger. And U-boat crews throughout the Atlantic had learned to trust this device completely with their lives, diving only when Metox actually warned them of genuine danger, thereby conserving precious battery power and maintaining valuable mobility on the surface as long as safely possible. This would have been absolutely impossible if they had to dive defensively for every distant aircraft engine sound, every passing bird flock, every false alarm. But Metox had given them tremendous confidence and operational freedom, except that Metox had one fatal technical limitation that German scientists and engineers hadn't anticipated, hadn't even considered remotely possible. It simply couldn't detect radar wavelengths below 50 centimeters, leaving U-boats completely and utterly blind to the 10-centimeter emissions of British Type 271 radar and the similar ASV Mark III radar that equipped Allied patrol aircraft. And even worse for German strategic prospects, Nazi scientists had thoroughly convinced themselves to elaborate theoretical calculations that centimetric radar was technically impossible to build with available technology, that atmospheric absorption effects would make such extremely high frequencies completely useless for practical detection beyond a few hundred meters maximum range. A catastrophic scientific miscalculation that would ultimately cost them the entire Battle of the Atlantic and 30,000 young German lives. The Italian Navy's experience in the Mediterranean theater provided a clear preview, a stark warning of exactly what awaited the German U-boats, though neither the German Kriegsmarine nor the Italian Regia Marina learned anything from each other's catastrophic failures, because Axis military cooperation was virtually non-existent. The Regia Marina entered the war in June 1940 with absolutely no radar whatsoever, not a single working operational set in their entire Mediterranean fleet. Their admirals and senior commanders had completely dismissed electronic detection technology as entirely unnecessary in the relatively confined waters of the Mediterranean, where visual contact was supposedly always possible, where traditional naval warfare methods had worked successfully for centuries. An absolutely fatal assumption that British radar-equipped vessels would shatter repeatedly in devastating night engagements, most catastrophically at the Battle of Cape Matapan in March 1941, where 3 Italian heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers were utterly annihilated in a one-sided night action they literally never saw coming, never knew was happening until heavy shells were already landing directly on their unprotected decks. Admiral Angelo Iacchino, commanding the Italian fleet at Matapan, would later write with painful honesty in his memoirs, "We were fighting completely blind against an enemy who could see perfectly in total darkness." His ships were completely unable to detect the approach of British battleships whose Type 279 air search radar tracked them continuously at 24,000 yards, nearly 14 miles distance, while Italian optical rangefinders and carefully trained lookouts with excellent night vision saw absolutely nothing except endless darkness. The British heavy guns opened devastating fire at point-blank range, achieving complete tactical surprise. And even after this absolute disaster, this utterly crushing defeat, the Italian Navy still wouldn't receive its first operational radar sets until spring 1943, far too late to affect a naval balance that had already shifted decisively toward the Allies. The Imperial Japanese Navy, despite beginning serious radar development work as early as 1936 under Professor Yagi Hidetsugu, the brilliant physicist whose revolutionary Yagi antenna design would ironically become standard equipment on Allied radar systems worldwide, suffered from even worse organizational dysfunction than the Italians when it came to actual radar deployment. The Imperial Japanese Navy and the Imperial Japanese Army developed completely separate and totally incompatible radar systems that couldn't communicate with each other at all, couldn't share technology or research findings, couldn't coordinate production, because the bitter rivalry between the two services was so intense and deep that they literally preferred to lose the war rather than cooperate effectively with each other. And by 1943, when most Allied ships carried multiple sophisticated radar sets for different tactical purposes, Japanese vessels were still relying primarily on optical rangefinders, mechanical fire control computers, and the supposedly superior natural night vision of their carefully selected and trained lookouts. A severe tactical handicap that American radar-directed naval gunfire would exploit absolutely ruthlessly in the brutal night surface battles around Guadalcanal. Commander Tamichi Hara of the Japanese destroyer Shigeru described with shocking honesty the terror of facing American radar at Tassafaronga. American torpedoes came from nowhere. No gun flashes, no searchlights, just sudden explosions. The Americans were firing from positions we couldn't see, guided by equipment we didn't understand. Though even this devastating demonstration didn't convince Japanese leadership to prioritize radar development, their Type 22 sets producing only 2 kilowatts of power compared to the 70 kilowatts of improved British Type 271Q sets. Back in the North Atlantic, which remained the decisive theater of the entire naval war, the first subtle signs that something fundamental had changed in submarine warfare came gradually through the dark winter months of 1942 into early 1943. U-boat commanders began reporting increasingly accurate night attacks by Allied escort vessels, with depth charges falling much closer than luck could explain. But German naval intelligence attributed this to improved tactics rather than revolutionary technology, a fatal misunderstanding that prevented effective countermeasures during the crucial period when they might have made a difference. The British, meanwhile, were systematically upgrading their radar capabilities. The Type 271Q, introduced in early 1943, featured a 70-kilowatt magnetron, providing greater range and resolution, combined with planned position indicator displays, showing a God's eye view of the surrounding ocean. Contacts appeared as bright glowing dots on the circular screen with their range and bearing immediately apparent, allowing escort commanders to coordinate complex multi-ship attacks with unprecedented precision. Lieutenant Commander Donald McIntyre, commanding Escort Group B2, described the transformation in his detailed after-action reports. With Type 271Q fully operational and our operators trained to expert level, night surface attacks by U-boats had become absolutely suicidal for the Germans. We could detect them within seconds of surfacing, track them continuously and precisely while they charge their batteries completely unaware of our presence, and attack with devastating accuracy before they have any idea we're even nearby. The radar operator calls out ranges and bearings while we close for the kill at maximum speed. Hedgehog projectiles fired on radar bearing alone with no need whatsoever for visual contact with the target. The Hedgehog anti-submarine weapon itself represented another brilliant technological leap forward that radar detection made devastatingly effective in actual combat. 24 spigot mortars arranged in rows, firing contact-fused projectiles ahead of the attacking vessel in an oval pattern, allowing continuous sonar contact to be maintained throughout the entire attack instead of losing the target completely in the ship's turbulent wake, as happened with traditional depth charges dropped from stern racks. And when combined with accurate radar detection of surfaced or snorkeling U-boat, when the attacking escort knew exactly where the submarine was located, the kill probability increased dramatically from less than 5% with conventional depth charge attacks to over 30% with coordinated radar-directed hedgehog attacks. The statistics told a story of technological dominance, translating directly into dead submarines and drowned crews. But the real transformation, the development that would prove absolutely decisive in winning the Battle of the Atlantic, came with airborne centimetric radar systems. The ASV Mark III entered operational service with RAF Coastal Command in early 1943, using the same revolutionary 10-centimeter technology as shipborne Type 271, but mounted in patrol aircraft, particularly the very long-range B-24 Liberators that could patrol the dreaded Mid-Atlantic air gap, that vast stretch of ocean previously beyond the range of land-based aircraft coverage where U-boats had operated with relative impunity. And these airborne radars could detect a fully surfaced U-boat at 20 nautical miles distance, could pick up even a periscope at 5 miles, all without triggering the Metox receivers that U-boat crews trusted absolutely with their lives. Squadron leader Terrence Bullock, an experienced pilot flying B-24 Liberators equipped with ASV Mark III, described his first radar-directed attack with clinical precision. Radar operator called contact at 18 miles bearing 090 degrees. We approached from down moon to minimize any chance of visual detection, maintaining cruising altitude until the very last moment. The U-boat was clearly charging batteries, running steady on diesel engines, making perhaps 12 knots. Absolutely no indication whatsoever that they knew we were coming, no crash dive, no lookout scanning our direction, nothing. We switched on the lee light at 1 mile distance, catching them completely exposed like actors on a stage. Deck gun unmanned, bridge watch scrambling desperately for the hatch. Our depth charges straddled the boat perfectly as they attempted an emergency crash dive. Oil slicks and debris surfaced moments later. One of 6 U-boats his squadron would destroy in March 1943 alone. The lee light itself, a brilliant innovation consisting of a 22 million candle power searchlight mounted under the aircraft wing, turned the final approach into an inescapable death trap for any U-boat caught on the surface at night. The brilliant white beam stabbing down from the darkness like the finger of an angry god, illuminating the submarine with the intensity of midday sun, giving aircraft gunners perfect visibility for devastating strafing runs with 50 caliber machine guns, while depth charges tumbled toward a frantically diving boat. And U-boat survivors, the handful who lived through these attacks, would describe for the rest of their lives the absolute psychological terror of that sudden blinding illumination, the knowledge that they had perhaps 30 seconds to live. Oberleutnant Zur C. Herbert Werner, executive officer on U-230 and one of the few who survived multiple war patrols, recorded the nightmarish experience in his memoir. The night exploded into brilliant white light without any warning whatsoever. No alert from Metox, no engine sound audible over our own diesels, just sudden blazing illumination from directly overhead. Men screaming aircraft as we tumbled through the conning tower, hatch in pure panic. The boat went into an emergency crash dive as massive explosions shook the entire hull. Depth charges so close that cork insulation rained down from the overhead. And we knew with absolute certainty then that something fundamental had changed, that the night no longer belonged to us. By March 1943, the combination of shipborne Type 271 radar and airborne ASV Mark III had created an integrated electronic detection network that left literally no safe space for U-boats to surface and charge their batteries. Every convoy was now surrounded by multiple radar-equipped escorts that could see clearly in absolute darkness, while long-range patrol aircraft equipped with radar patrol with deadly efficiency, turning the predator definitively into prey. The mathematics of destruction were absolutely relentless. A Type WWII U-boat needed to surface for 6 to 8 hours every single day to fully charge its batteries. Its submerged speed of only 7.6 knots was completely insufficient to position ahead of convoys for attacks. But now every single hour spent on the surface exposed it to radar detection from ranges far beyond visual contact. And once detected by this invisible electronic net, the U-boat faced coordinated attacks from multiple escorts and aircraft, all striking with devastating accuracy before the submarine commander even knew his boat was in mortal danger. The German response proved inadequate. The Naxos radar detector, introduced in September 1943, could detect 10-centimeter emissions, but suffered excessive sensitivity, triggering false alarms, causing crews to ignore warnings. And Allies were already developing 3-centimeter radar Naxos couldn't detect. Donitz desperately interrogated survivors, analyzed reports, consulted experts. He concluded Allies detected Metox emissions itself, ordered all detectors shut down August 1943, leaving boats more vulnerable. The real problem, centimetric radar, remained unrecognized until late 1943. The psychological impact devastated crews. Young men who volunteered believing in superiority now found themselves helpless. Morale collapsed as boats failed to return. Funk Matt Hines Schaefer described the atmosphere. We felt like rabbits, not hunters. Every surface moment filled with dread. Everyone watching sky, listening for engines, knowing death could come without warning. Japanese submarines observed German failures. Admiral Miwa requested information, but Germans provided limited details. Japanese submarines continued with inferior equipment. Losses mounted as American radar made their large boats easy targets. Lieutenant Commander Zengio Rita wrote, "We heard rumors about German boats destroyed by mysterious detection. We experienced the same terror. American aircraft appeared from nowhere. We learned too late our technology was generations behind." Italian submarines found salvation in September 1943 armistice, switching sides as Germans were slaughtered. Tenente di Vascello Enzo Grossi described operations without radar. We sailed blind while enemies had perfect vision. Every surface was gambling with death. Radar integrated with other technologies multiplied lethality. High-frequency direction finding triangulated radio transmissions. Ultra-intelligence from broken Enigma codes revealed patrol routes, while radar provided tactical detection. Commander Peter Gretton explained, "Ultra told us what looked huffed up when they transmitted, but radar let us see them, turning intelligence into kills." The convoy battle around ONS 5 in late April and early May 1943 demonstrated radar's decisive impact. 40 U-boats concentrated against this slow convoy. Weather favored attackers with rain squalls. But Type 271 radars tracked every approach, vector reinforcements, coordinated counterattacks, sinking 6 U-boats while losing only 13 merchants. HMS Duncan detected boat after boat attempting penetration. Her operator called contacts repeatedly. The destroyer raced to intercept while submarines remained unaware until star shells burst and depth charges bracketed positions. Monthly losses mounted terrifyingly. 10 boats February, 15 March, 20 April, then 42 in May. Experienced commanders dying faster than replacement. Training pipeline unable to keep pace. Corvette Captain Victor Schutze withdrew after barely surviving, telling officers, "The game changed completely. We're fighting an enemy seeing in darkness while we're blind. Sending more boats is murder. We need new technology, but current operations are suicide." The Type XXI Electabut designed for sustained underwater operations should have restored effectiveness. But production delays meant only one completed combat patrol before war's end. Retrofitting snorkels created different vulnerability. Speed reduced to 5 knots, impossible for positioning. And snorkel heads created radar signatures. Oberleutnant zur See Albert Schnee described snorkel torture. Running submerged was physical torture. Exhaust gases leaked. Pressure changes burst eardrums. Speed so slow we couldn't chase convoys. Bay of Biscay became killing ground where radar aircraft maintained constant patrol. Aircraft flew parallel patterns covering every square mile. U-boats force submerged even at night. Flight Lieutenant Kenneth Moore described typical patrol. We flew at 2,000 feet, radar scanning. Bay divided into overlapping sectors. Nearly every patrol we found them. Once we had them lee light, and depth charges finished it. Technological surprise was complete because German scientists dismissed centimetric radar as impossible. Their magnetrons failed achieving useful power. Not realizing British researchers solved the problem with different cavity design generating 50 kilowatts. Professor Leo Brand admitted, "We convinced ourselves centimetric radar would be useless. Our calculations showed atmospheric absorption would attenuate signals. We never considered raw power could overcome absorption." Japanese suffered similar blindness, development hampered by inter-service rivalry. Captain Toshikazu Ami described realization. "We believed superior night fighting skills gave us advantage, but Americans could see beyond visual range. Our tactical superiority meaningless." Italian Navy's experience proved tragic. Few GU-4 radars arriving spring 1943, months before armistice. Admiral Raphael de Courten lamented, "We entered technological war with 19th century methods. Cape Matapan proved we fought blind." The human cost was staggering. 1,832 submariners died, May 1943 alone. Matro Sennfreiter Hans Yerbila, one of 3 survivors from U-556, described final moments. Depth charges came from nowhere, just explosions throwing men against bulkheads. Water rushing through torn hull. Abandoned ship order came too late. 45 comrades trapped inside. Strategic impact extended beyond numbers. The U-boat threat that nearly starved Britain was neutralized so thoroughly convoys crossed virtually unmolested after June 1943. Liberty ships delivered supplies faster than U-boats could sink them. Churchill wrote, "The cavity magnetron, no larger than small electric motor, proved more valuable than divisions of troops, giving our forces ability to see in darkness what submarines thought hidden. A single breakthrough worth more than all gold in Bank of England." American contribution, initially limited to adapting British technology, soon exceeded original. American engineers developed improved magnetrons generating higher power. Their 3-centimeter H2X radar achieved resolution, detecting periscopes in sea states that swamped 10-centimeter returns. Admiral Ernest King, initially skeptical, became enthusiastic convert. The ability to detect periscopes at night seemed like magic, but Type 271 proved it repeatedly. Once we understood implications, we pushed production to maximum, equipping every vessel, deliberately turning Atlantic into U-boat graveyard. Soviet Navy receiving Type 271 through Lend-Lease achieved similar results in Baltic and Arctic. Captain Second Rank Alexei Lavrov, commanding destroyer Gremyashi, reported, "British radar gave us eyes in polar night, detecting German U-boats attempting to attack our convoys to Murmansk. The fascist submarines learned Arctic darkness no longer protected them. Our depth charges found targets optical lookouts could never have seen." Though Soviet domestic radar development remained primitive throughout the war, dependent almost entirely on Allied equipment. Swedish naval attaché Commander Eric Åland observed with Scandinavian clarity, "The Battle of the Atlantic turned on single technology Germany failed to anticipate. Their U-boats designed for war where darkness meant invisibility. But British radar eliminated that assumption. Technology defeats tactics absolutely when the gap is this large." His perceptive reports influenced Swedish naval procurement for decades afterward. The psychological warfare aspect proved equally devastating. U-boat crews developed what psychiatrists termed radar neurosis. The constant fear of invisible detection creating stress casualties, even among boats never encountering attacks. Men suffered breakdowns from unbearable strain. Corvette Captain Reinhard Lehmann Willenbrock, commanding U-96, observed deterioration. Crews previously eager for combat now dreaded leaving port. New men heard terrifying survivor stories. Tales of boats caught with no warning. You could see fear in their eyes during charging. Everyone listening for engines, watching for searchlights, knowing radar made us visible when we couldn't see anything. The hunters had become hunted. The technological race continued even after radar's impact became clear. Germans developed Hohentuel surface search radar capable of detecting aircraft at 10 to 20 kilometers, but operated at wavelengths Allied detectors identified, creating dilemma where using radar revealed U-boat position. Fregatin Captain Gunnar Hessler, Donitz' son-in-law and chief of staff, analyzed the trap. Every countermeasure arrived too late and created vulnerabilities. Naxos detected 10 centimeter, but not 3 centimeter. Our radars revealed positions. Snorkels reduced speed. The Electrobut might have restored advantage, but production came years too late. We were always one step behind, where second place meant death. The broader implications for naval warfare were revolutionary. Radar transforming surface combat as dramatically as submarine operations. Battleships engaging beyond visual range. Aircraft carriers launching strikes in weather that would have grounded planes. Destroyers tracking targets through smoke screens. Every aspect of naval tactics changed by ability to see beyond human vision. Admiral Andrew Cunningham, Commander-in-Chief Mediterranean Fleet, summarized transformation. Radar gave us capabilities Nelson could never have imagined. Fighting battles at night with daylight accuracy. Tracking enemies through weather that would have hidden fleets. Coordinating forces across distances visual signals could never span. The fundamental nature of naval warfare changed forever by electromagnetic waves we couldn't see, but which revealed everything. His fleet victories over Italian Navy demonstrated radar's decisive advantage repeatedly. The German surface fleet recognized radar's impact clearly. Captain Zur See Fritz Otto Busch, commanding battleship Scharnhorst during final battle, reported by radio before his ship sank. Enemy radar has us constantly illuminated. They fire accurately without seeing us. We cannot escape or hide. Fighting enemy who sees everything while we see nothing. His message, one of last German capital ship, destroyed by radar-directed gunfire. Japanese battleship Yamato, largest warship ever built, met similar fate April 1945. American carrier aircraft guided by radar through weather that should have provided cover. Her massive 18-inch guns useless against enemies attacking from beyond visual range. Admiral Ito Seiichi went down with his ship, recognizing traditional naval warfare had ended, replaced by technology Japan failed to master. Production statistics reflected industrial prioritization. Britain manufactured over 350 Type 271 sets by war's end. America producing thousands of centimetric radars across multiple variants, while Germany managed barely 100 Naxos detectors arriving too late, detecting only some Allied frequencies. The industrial imbalance as decisive as technological advantage. Lord Charwell, Churchill's scientific advisor, calculated exchange ratio. Each Type 271 set cost approximately £3,000 to manufacture and required one operator. Yet these devices destroyed U-boats worth millions of Reichsmarks and crews that took years to train. The return on investment exceeds anything achieved by conventional weapons. Proof that scientific superiority could determine military outcomes more decisively than numerical advantage. His analysis influenced British defense, spending for generations. Training infrastructure adapted to radar's demands. Schools established to teach operators distinguishing submarine returns from wave clutter, recognizing characteristic spike of periscope versus debris, understanding atmospheric conditions affecting propagation, skills meaning difference between successful detection and U-boat escaping to attack convoys. Leading seaman Ronald Mason, Type 271 operator on HMS Vedette, described training. We spent weeks learning to read the scope, understanding sea state effective returns, that temperature inversions could create false contacts, that periscope made distinctive sharp spike, while debris gave fuzzy returns. The difference between life and death for merchant sailors depended on our ability to distinguish real targets from ghost returns. His expertise typical of thousands of operators who became eyes of fleet. Maintenance challenges of operating complex electronics in marine environments pushed technological development. Moisture-proof housings, shock-mounted components, stabilized platforms to maintain antenna orientation in rough seas. Each problem solved advancing art of military electronics, creating capabilities that would define post-war naval development. Chief Petty Officer Thomas Clark, radar technician aboard HMS Sheffield, explained challenges. Salt spray corroded connections. Vibration loosened components. Temperature changes caused condensation inside units. Keeping these sets operational required constant attention. But we knew lives depended on that radar working when needed, so we improvised solutions, created maintenance procedures, developed expertise that didn't exist before war. His experience replicated across every radar-equipped vessel. German reaction to radar defeat influenced post-war naval development. Their surviving U-boat commanders advocating for submarines that could operate entirely submerged, never needing to surface where radar could detect them, leading directly to nuclear submarine development, where underwater endurance became unlimited. Though this solution came decades too late to affect World War II outcome, Admiral Eberhard Gott, chief of U-boat operations, testified at Nuremberg, "Radar defeated us completely. Our entire tactical doctrine assumed darkness provided concealment, that surface mobility gave advantage. But British radar eliminated both assumptions, forcing us to continue operations we knew were suicidal, because admitting defeat meant accepting technology had made our submarine force obsolete." His testimony confirmed German leadership understood technological disadvantage but couldn't counter it. The Pacific submarine campaign demonstrated different dynamics. American boats equipped with superior radar hunting Japanese vessels lacking both radar and radar detectors. USS Wahoo under Commander Dudley Morton, using radar to track targets beyond visual range, surfacing to attack positions Japanese escorts couldn't detect, achieving kill ratios that dwarfed German U-boat successes even during happy time. Commander Richard O'Kane, commanding USS Tang, described advantage. RSJ radar could track Japanese convoys at 25,000 yards. We'd plot their course and speed, move ahead on surface using radar to avoid escorts, attack from ahead where they didn't expect submarines, then escape on surface guided by radar, while they searched blindly. Technology gave us near impunity against enemy operating with World War I methods. His boat sank 33 ships before being lost to own torpedo. The Mediterranean submarine campaign saw similar disparities. British T-class boats equipped with Type 291 radar hunting Italian submarines operating blind. HMS Upholder under Lieutenant Commander Malcolm Wanklin, using radar to track Italian supply convoys to North Africa, sinking over 100,000 tons of shipping, while Italian submarines achieved minimal results despite superior numbers. Capitano de Corvetta Gianfranco Gazzana commanding submarine Bagnolini, admitted, "We operated like blind men, while British submarines had perfect vision. Our boats were detected and destroyed before we knew enemies were present. The few radar sets we received in 1943 coming too late to matter. Naval balance already decisively shifted by British technological superiority we couldn't match." His elite submarine unit disbanded after catastrophic losses. The economic impact of radar victory rippled through entire nations. Britain's survival depended on Atlantic convoys that U-boats nearly severed in 1942. But radar's defeat of submarine threat allowed massive buildup of supplies for D-Day. 2 million Americans transported across Atlantic, without significant loss after mid-1943. The arsenal of democracy delivering victory through sea lanes that radar kept open. The U-boat building program, consuming enormous German resources, produced 73 Type 7 submarines monthly, each requiring specialized steel batteries, diesels, torpedoes, and trained crews. Yet radar rendered this massive investment worthless. Boats destroyed faster than they could be built. Experienced crews lost faster than replacements could be trained. The entire submarine force reduced to impotence by technology costing fraction of submarine construction. Reich Minister Albert Speer, head of German war production, calculated waste. "We invested billions of Reichsmarks in U-boats that radar made obsolete, resources that could have built thousands of tanks or aircraft. But we continued building submarines even after their futility became obvious, trapped by institutional momentum and Hitler's insistence that wonder weapons would reverse defeat, throwing good money after bad while Allied radar ensured those boats would die on first patrols." His post-war memoirs reveal economic catastrophe of fighting technology with numbers. The scientific legacy extended beyond military applications. Cavity magnetron technology enabling microwave communications, radar astronomy, medical imaging, countless civilian applications stemming from device that first allowed HMS Orcis to detect periscope at 900 yards. The butterfly effect of scientific breakthrough transforming entire civilization. Sir Robert Watson Watt, often credited as radar's inventor though technology had multiple fathers, reflected, "We gave sight to blind, allowing ships to see through darkness and weather, aircraft to detect what human eyes could never perceive." But real victory was proving that scientific superiority could determine military outcomes. That small device generating electromagnetic waves could defeat largest submarine fleet ever assembled. His contribution to victory measured not in battles, but in technologies that rendered entire enemy strategies obsolete. The radar development pipeline continued producing improvements throughout war. Type 277 replaced 271, with even greater range and resolution. 3 centimeter sets replacing 10 centimeter. Each generation maintaining technological superiority over German countermeasures. The scientific war won by maintaining momentum rather than resting on initial advantages. Air Marshal Sir Arthur Harris, commander of RAF Bomber Command, observed, "We learned that technological superiority was temporary, that enemies would eventually develop countermeasures. So we kept advancing, newer radars replacing older ones before Germans could counter them, maintaining advantage through continuous development rather than believing any single technology would remain decisive forever." His philosophy drove Allied research throughout war. On that morning of May 24, 1943, as Donitz transmitted the withdrawal order, he couldn't have known the war was effectively over. That radar had eliminated Germany's only remaining strategic weapon capable of affecting outcome. That the technology first tested on HMS Orcis 2 years earlier had grown into electromagnetic network, making Allied victory inevitable. The cavity magnetron proved mightier than all the U-boats ever built. The last entry in U-Boat Command War Diary from May 1943 reads simply, "The enemy's superiority in location devices has made continuation of the battle impossible. Withdrawal from the Atlantic is necessary to prevent further catastrophic losses." 15 words admitting total defeat by technology German science had declared impossible British engineering had made reality, and 42 U-boats had died, proving decisive in Battle of Atlantic. The waves of North Atlantic continued their eternal rhythm, indifferent to technological revolution that had played out across their surface. But beneath those waves lay graves of thousands of submariners who had believed darkness was their ally, never knowing that invisible electromagnetic waves had betrayed them to enemies they never saw. The Battle of the Atlantic won not by bravest sailors or largest fleets, but by scientists in British laboratories who had given their nation a power to see in darkness, a power that changed not just one battle, but the entire nature of war itself. Thank you for watching this investigation into the secret technology that changed World War II. If you enjoyed this detailed historical analysis, please subscribe to the channel and check out the other videos on your screen now for more fascinating untold stories from history.